Hello friends, in this video we are proceeding further with the remaining topics of networking chapter. Okay, so we will finish today all the remaining topics and classes related to networking, and then we will proceed for the practice. We will start with the URI class. A relatively recent addition is URI class. It is a uniform resource identifier. It is similar to URS. Okay, that is in fact URS constitute a subset of URI. URI represent a standard way to identify a resource, and URL also describes how to access the resource. Okay, so what is the difference between URI and URL? URI is the standard way of identification of resource, and second, URL is tells how to access the particular resource, that is particular location of the particular resource. Okay, cookies. The java.net package includes classes and interfaces that help manage cookies and can be used to create a stateful HTTP session. Okay, when it is a stateful, it is related to your state will be maintained as opposite to stateless HTTP session. Classes, those classes and interfaces include cookie handler, cookie manager, HTTP cookie, cookie policy, and cookie store. Okay, cookie handler, cookie manager, and HTTP cookie are classes, and cookie policy, cookie store are interfaces. All but cookie handler was added by Java 6. Okay, cookie handler was added by Java 5. The creation of stateful HTTP session is beyond the scope of this particular course, that is Java, Learn Java to Master. For information about cookies with servlets, we will see the chapter upcoming. Okay, after 9 to 10 chapters, this chapter will come. Next, TCP/IP server socket. Java has different socket classes that must be used for creating server applications. The server socket is used to create servers that listen for either local or remote client programs to connect to them on published ports. Okay, so server socket is generally made for servers to listen to local remote client programs, and they will listen to particular published ports. Okay, those are already we have listed. Server sockets are quite different from normal socket. When you create a server socket, it will register itself with the system as having an interest in client connection. Okay, so it is particularly made for as to behave as a server. Okay, so as soon as you will create a server socket object, it will register itself and tell, I am interested, please send me the client requirements, client connection. Okay, the constructors for server socket reflect the port number that you want to accept connections on. Okay, so whenever there are constructors of server socket, they tell the port number that you want to accept connection on, and optionally how long you want to queue for said port to be. Okay, so you will specify the port number on which there will be client connection and on which the server socket will be interested to take the connection. The queue length tells the system how many client connection it can leave pending before it should simply refuse the connection. Okay, default is 50. Queue length is how many client connection it can leave pending before it should simply refuse the connection. So how much time it can leave pending, how many client connection, total client connection it can leave pending, the default is 50. Simply, before it should simply refuse the connection. Okay, the constructors might throw input-output exception in adverse conditions. 3 of these constructors of server socket. First is server socket integer port throws IO exception, creates a server socket on the specified port with the queue length of default 50. Okay, and so it can wait for the it can leave pending 50 client connection at a time by default. Okay, then server socket integer port integer max queue throws input output exception, creates a server socket on the specified port with a maximum queue length of max queue. Okay, Server socket, integer port, integer max queue, inet address, local address, throws IO exception. Okay. Server creates a server socket port max queue, creates a server socket on the specified port with a maximum queue length that you have provided in the bracket. Third is server socket port number max queue inet address, that is local address. Creates a server socket on the specified port with the max queue length of max queue on a multi-home host. Local address specifies the IP address to which this socket binds. Okay, it is a multi-home on the multi-home host PC. Local address tell the IP address to which this socket binds. Okay, server socket has a method called accept, which is a blocking call that will wait for a client to initiate communication and then return with a normal socket that is then used for communication with the client. Okay, so one method, it has server socket class has one method that is accept, which is a blocking call. What that call will do, it will wait for the client to initiate a or start a communication and then return with a normal socket object that is then used with the used for the communication with the client. Datagram. TCP/IP style networking for it is good for most networking needs. What is the advantage of TCP/IP style? Why it is used generally? Because it provides serialized, predictable, reliable stream of packet data transfer. Okay, this is not without its cost, however. TCP includes many complicated algorithms for dealing with congestion control on crowded networks, as well as pessimistic expectation about packet loss. Okay. Although it is a serialized, predictable, and reliable stream for packet transfer from one point to another point, okay, this is not without its cost, and it has very complicated algorithms to understand that will deal with the how you will control the traffic on the network. Okay, how the congestion will be controlled on the traffic network, and also pessimistic expectation, that is it that will expect always that packet data will not be lost. This leads to somewhat inefficient way to transport data from one point to another. Okay, so to provide the alternative for this inefficient way and make it efficient, we use the datagram. Datagram are bundles of information passed between machines. Okay, so how the data information is passed on datagram? As a bundle. They are somewhat like a hard throw from well-trained but by blindfolded catcher to the third baseman. Okay. Once the datagram has been released to its intended target, there is no assurance that it will arrive or even that someone will there to catch it. Okay, it will throw. Irrespective of there is someone to catch it, or it is no guarantee that if there is still available, somebody is still there, then also it is no guarantee, there is no guarantee that it will be caught. Likewise, when the datagram is received, there is no assurance that it has not been damaged in between, or whoever sent is still there to receive a response that I have received the data. Java implement datagram on top of the UDP protocol. Okay, UDP is not reliable. By using two classes, first is datagram packet object is the data container, while datagram socket object is the mechanism used to send or receive datagram packet. Okay, so first class is datagram packet that actually holds the data that you want to transfer from one point to another point, and datagram socket is the way or a mechanism. It is how it will be sent from one point to another point. So now we will see first datagram socket. So datagram socket is a mechanism how datagram packet will be transmitted from one point to another point. So first constructors are public constructors are Datagram socket throws socket exception. Datagram socket integer port throws socket exception. Datagram socket integer port INET address IP address throws socket exception. Datagram socket address throws socket exception. So there are 1, 2, 3, and 4 public constructors. One is default constructor, it throws socket exception. Second is constructor with port number, it throws the socket exception. Datagram socket integer port INET address IP address throws socket exception. In third, we have provided the IP address, and in the fourth one, datagram socket address throws the socket exception. The first creates datagram socket bound to any unused port on the local computer. Okay, so it is very first basic constructor, default constructor. It creates a datagram socket bound to any unused port on a local computer. Second, creates a datagram socket bound to particular port that you have specified as an integer number. Third is datagram socket bound to the specified port and INET address. And fourth is datagram socket to the specified socket address. Okay. Socket address is abstract class that is implemented by its concrete class INET socket address. So you have to provide the socket address object in the fourth thing. Datagram socket, this one constructor. Okay. INET socket address encapsulate IP address with a port number. Okay. What is the INET socket address? It encapsulate or bind together IP address with a port number. So it will mix together or match together, combine together IP address and a port number. All can throw a socket exception if an error occurs while creating the particular socket as you have provided in a constructor. Datagram socket defines many methods. Two of the most important are send and receive. Okay. Void send datagram packet throws input output exception. Void receive datagram packet throws input output exception. The send method sends packet to the port specified by packet. Receive method waits for the packet to be received from the port specified by packet and returns the result. Okay. Send packet sends the packet to the particular port specified by packet, and receive wait for the packet from the received from the port number specified by packet object datagram packet and returns the particular result. Other methods give you access to various attributes associated with the datagram socket. So there are still other methods. Those will give you access to various attributes associated with the datagram socket. Okay, there is a sampling. INET address, get INET address. If a socket is connected, then the address is written, otherwise null is written. Get local port returns the number of the local port. Integer get port returns the number of the port to which the socket is connected. It returns -1 if the socket is not connected to a port. Okay. Number of port to which the socket is connected. If it is not connected to anything, it will return -1. Boolean is bound returns true if the socket is bound to an address, otherwise false. Is connected returns true if the socket is connected to a server, otherwise return false. Set so time out integer milliseconds. Sets the time out period. Set the time out period to the number of milliseconds passed in milliseconds. Okay. Next is datagram packet. It defines several constructors what actually holds the data. Byte data, integer size, first constructor. Second is byte data, integer offset, integer size. Third is byte data, integer size, INET address, IP address, and port number. Fourth is datagram packet, byte data, integer offset, integer size, INET address, IP address, and port number. First specifies a buffer that will receive data and the size of the packet. Okay. Okay, so you will specify a buffer, okay, that will receive data in this packet. It is used for receiving data over a set datagram socket. The second allows you to specify an offset into the buffer at which data will be stored. Third, we specify target address and port. Okay, we at the particular port, at the particular address, the data will be stored. Okay, which are used by datagram socket to determine where the data will be set. Okay, third one, to which address and which port this data byte data array will be set. The fourth transmits packet beginning at the specified offset into the data. Okay, think of the first two forms, building inbox, and the second as stuffing and addressing an envelope. The first two forms, building, taking the data into buffer, and second two forms sends the data to a particular address. Datagram packet defines several methods, plus we have seen now that give access to address and port number as well as raw data and its set. The get methods are used that will receive, and set methods are used that will be used for sending. INET address, get address returns the address of the source for datagrams being received. Okay, or destination for datagrams being sent. Get address will return the address of the source for datagram being received or destination for datagrams being sent. Byte get data returns the byte array of the data contained in the datagram, mostly used to retrieve data from the datagram after it has been received. Okay. Get integer get length returns the length of the valid data contained in the byte array that will be returned from the get data method. So get data will get the data after it has been received, and get length returns the length of the valid data contained in the byte array. It is important that is the valid data that would be returned from the get data method. Okay, so it will only give you the length of the valid data. This may not be equal to length of the whole byte array. Only valid data length will be there, which is get from get data method. Integer get offset returns the starting index of the data. Then get port returns the port number, set address, INET address, IP address, sets the address to which the packet will be sent. The address is specified by IP address. Okay, so set address, set the particular address to which the packet will be sent, and you will give the its object. Okay, set data byte data sets the data to particular data, offset to 0 and the length to the number of bytes in data. Then set data byte data integer index integer size sets the data to data, offset to index, and length to particular size you provided. Then set length integer size sets the length of the packet to size. Then set port integer port sets the port to port. Okay. Then datagram example. We will see the example that implements very simple network communication client and server. Messages are typed into window at the server and written across the network to the client where they are displayed. Okay, demonstrate datagram. Write server static integer server port 998, client port 999, buffer size 1024, datagram socket object DS, then buffer byte buffer array, no byte of particular size, that is 1024. Okay, the server throws exception position is equal to 0. While true, read the data, read the input from the user. Messages are typed into window at the server and written across the network to the client where they are displayed. So at one side we will read, it will read whatever we type in the window and it will be stored. If it is -1, server quits return. Yes, /r break /n new datagram packet buffer position get localhost INET address dot get localhost client port. Then again position 0 and break. Okay, so line by line, why it is position 0, here also we make the position is equal to 0, and after new line is encountered, again we are making it 0. So after each and every line is sent, position will be again 0. So line by line the data will be sent and received to the client, and client is the same machine. Okay, you know, you don't need the two different machines. Okay, so one will send the data from 998 server port. This is the port number of your machine. Okay. And this is the client port 999. Okay. Then default buffer position plus plus. Okay. So position is incremented so that data will be returned in the buffer array. And whatever the characters are transmitted or casted through byte primitive type. Then the client throws exception while true datagram packet, new datagram packet. Object is created and datagram packet dot receive and packet. Okay, and whatever is received, it will be converted to string p dot get data 0 p dot get data. And then public static void main if args dot length is equal to 1, then a new datagram socket object is created basically, and server port is put over here as a parameter in the datagram socket object, and server is called, otherwise new datagram socket the client. Okay, args dot length means whatever, if you are sending anything as a parameter as a first argument, then the server object will be created, otherwise client object is created. So first communication will be started with server, otherwise with the client. The sample program is restricted by the datagram socket constructor to running between two ports on the same local machine. You don't need different machines. To use the program, run Java write server in one window. This will be your client, and then run Java write server 1. This will be the server. Same program run twice. Anything that is typed in the server window will be sent to the client window after a new line is received. Each and every new line character /n, the data will be transmitted from the one port to another port. Okay, so this way we have ended with the networking chapter. In the next session you will see with the practical part. So meet you in the next session. Till then you can practice the programs provided over here. You can learn new topics teach over here in the previous session and first session as well, so that if you have not understood it clearly, you can understood it better, and you can, when the practice session when you will see the practice session or practical part, you will understand it very clearly, so that it will be easier for you to implement the networking programs by your own. So meet you in the next session. Thank you so much.